right, it is a near instant reaction Sunday and our first ever episode on a weekend. Welcome in everybody to a instant reaction special episode edition of the Gem City Sports Podcast. Isaac Petcash, Jonathan Williams. He has learned in our time with the podcast platform that there is not a single time and place that I won't start something, and he's probably kicking himself for being a part of this. But the District 10 playoff brackets for football have officially been revealed. We're going to put the banner across the bottom of your screen to show you the matchups, and then we'll go a little bit in depth on each bracket in just a second, Jonathan. But we were expecting the brackets to come out maybe this afternoon. It's a bit of a surprise, I think, at least to me, that they came out this morning. But on first glance at the brackets, there are some surprises, but I don't know if compared to previous years, there was as much of a surprise this year as there's been in previous years, maybe.
You know, I was in church when you sent the brackets over, but I had a chance to glance at them quickly. And honestly, the biggest surprise that I saw was D-10 deciding to go with 8 teams in 3A, but also it kind of shocked me. They put Slip as the 7 seed and Conneaut as the 8 seed. That was surprising to me. I thought Conneaut, if they were getting in, they earned that 7 seed, right? We were debating whether it was going to be 6 or 7 teams in the field. They went with 8. We thought, okay, if they go with 8, Slip's automatically the 8 seed with their record this season, but that's not how they saw it, I guess.
No, and we're going to get to the 3A bracket in a second. We also know the times and the dates and all that fun jazz for the high school football playoff brackets. So we're going to try to put them up while we can here. And let's go ahead and start with the 1A bracket. I know Jonathan and I may be out of picture here. I'm going to try to make it so that we can kind of both see each other here. But you see the 1A bracket. Wilmington is the number 1 seed. We expected that they get the bye. These 2 games, by the way, for 1A being played on Saturday. The interesting one to me is how 2, 3, and 4 were ordered. I think I fully anticipated that Greenville might be the top seed. They end up getting the number 2 seed with a 9-1 record. They'll play Lakeview, who got in after a couple of big wins down the stretch. You Reynolds and Eisenhower in a huge 4-5 matchup. And then how about, Jonathan, to me, the one that pops off the page, Cambridge Springs and Sagertown going to face off. The Panthers had a really, really good year, 6-4 with James Wolfgang. Cambridge Springs, the 3 seed, the defending D10 champs. They open with their rivals in Crawford County just down the road.
I don't like this, though, because now you set up for a second-round matchup, potentially, with Cambridge Springs and Greenville, where I thought it was pretty much clear that those 2 teams were the class of that 1A division, and those 2 teams should have been 1 and 2. I don't know where they got Wilmington from at the 1 seed.
I think Wilmington, I think it was understood down the stretch that Wilmington was playing really well. Keep in mind, this was a 2A team last year. I think that plays a lot into it. And we haven't gotten a chance to see them much. I figured, if anything, that Greenville would be the top seed, and you would save a Greenville-Cambridge Springs potential rematch for the final. D10 decides to not do that and put them in the semis. So what it sets up, at least in my view, is a very interesting potential situation, like you said, Jonathan, where you have Greenville-Cambridge Springs in the semis, and you would have Wilmington/Reynolds or Eisenhower in the semis as well. But I look at this bracket, and I think the biggest shock to me would be Greenville not being the top seed, but obviously Wilmington being up there at 1. And I think for Cambridge Springs, you look at the bracket and your Nate Liberty, you say, well, our route to the D10 championship to repeat's not going to be that easy.
Yeah, you know, it's not going to be a cakewalk for you at all. You're going to have 2 really hard games. Assuming you get through the first one, Sagertown is no pushover, and that's going to be a really hard fought first round game. It's not exactly how you imagine opening your playoffs when you finish with a 9-1 record. However, this is how the committee saw it, so you got a road in front of you.
Yeah. And again, keep in mind, Cambridge Springs and Sagertown going to face off for the second time this season. Cambridge Springs won the first meeting back on September 13th, 36-3. But Sagertown's been much better since then. They're 6-4. Traditionally don't have a ton of winning seasons, and so this is something for the Panthers under James Wolfgang, who's been there for quite some time, an opportunity for them to potentially pull off an upset. Let's go ahead and show you the 2A bracket. We go from an 17 field, I should say, to a 14 field. This is how it looks. District 10 choosing to take 4 teams, which I think was understandable. Maybe Iroquois had an argument to potentially get in as like a 5 seed or something. But here's the bracket. Farrell and Seneca will face off this upcoming Saturday in what I think is going to be an intriguing first-round game. The Steelers, to me, are not a shoo-in to win 2A this year with the struggles that they've had. Specifically in the early and then latter half of the season. And then Mercier's Prep and Sharpsville in the 2-3 matchup, with I think is going to be a banger. Jonathan, I know that Farrell's probably the presumptive favorite coming out of this bracket, but it would not shock me if any of these 4 teams end up winning 2A. I think that's how good this field is, albeit with only 4 teams.
Yeah, like that Farrell game is not that's not a foregone conclusion at all. We got to remember, this is a Seneca Bobcats team that started off 3-0 this year, towards the middle. But this is a really Seneca team, started off really hot and has kind of regained that fire a little bit heading into postseason play. It's going to make for a really good 1 versus 4 matchup that I don't think is going to be like your traditional 1 versus 4.
And I think the other thing too is, like we said, there's a chance for any combination of a District 10 championship game. I think Seneca, after a strong start, maybe has not performed as well as Jack Corey's team would have liked to have performed, especially down the stretch portion of the season. But for the Farrell Steelers, I think after an 0-3 start to the year, they rattle off a bevy of wins. I believe it was 5 straight. And now you're sitting there off a loss to Cathedral Prep. And the big question for me is, how good is this offense really compared to what it has been in previous years? Obviously, we haven't seen them play a ton. We did watch them play Cathedral Prep. We did see the Fort LaBeouf game where the Bison got them early in the season. But I think for Seneca, what teams have proven against Farrell is you can run the football on them. And I think if the Bobcats can use Ryland Harwood and the likes to be able to grind the clock, run the football, limit time of possession for the Steelers, I think they got a shot in this game. And then Mercyhurst Prep and Sharpsville, to me, is a coin flip. I think if Vinny Feliciano gets going, it could be a long night for the Blue Devils, but that Sharpsville defense traditionally is very good. So I think it could be an interesting matchup in the 2-3. My son's really excited too, as you can see. He's got a baseball bat in the background. So for those of you watching, he likes high school football as well. All right, let's talk 3A, Jonathan. This is really where we talked a lot about last episode with District 10 playoffs and what the seeding would be. We thought District 10 would take 6 or 7. They end up taking 8. They include Slippery Rock and Conneaut in the field. And here's the bracket. You get Sharon and Conneaut as the 1-8 matchup. These games all happening on Friday. The Tigers, of course, we figured the number 1 seed with the victory head-to-head over Hickory. Hornets get the 2 seed. They get Slippery Rock in an all-Mercer County battle, and that sets up the 2 matchups that we're most excited about. Corey and Fort LaBeouf in the 3-6, Titusville, Fairview in the 4-5. Before we get to the local matchups, Jonathan, I think there was a little bit of us at the end of our podcast on Thursday that said, well, maybe District 10 may just take 8 and include Slippery Rock. I didn't think it was going to happen. I figured they would take 7. They would give Sharon a bye, and they would give Conneaut the 7 seed. But to me, what's the most surprising is the fact that they took 8, and the fact that Slippery Rock, despite a head-to-head win over Conneaut, is the 7 seed. My concern with the way that they pose the bracket is this. If you're District 10, I know a lot goes into head-to-head matchups, but I think head-to-head matchups should be just like the NFL and college. They only factor in if your records are identical. And Conneaut has 2 more wins than Slippery Rock, who ended the year at 3-7. I just don't see why District 10, first of all, I commend them for taking in Conneaut. Where my concern and question mark comes into play is why you put Slippery Rock ahead of them. If head-to-head's your only answer, Conneaut can say, well, we have 2 more wins. So I don't know. I'm a little... I proffer to say that confused me a little bit, but your reaction, Jonathan, to them taking 8 teams in 3A.
Yeah, it's just the question is, what precedent are you setting going forward? Because you kind of send the message that it doesn't really matter how well you perform throughout the course of the season, just as long as you beat 1 or 2 of the right teams, they'll put you above them. 5-5 versus 3-7. I don't think that should be any sort of argument as to who should be the higher seed, regardless of head-to-head matchup. Especially when the head-to-head matchup wasn't some ridiculously lopsided score.
Yeah, 16-13, it was close.
If it's a 16-15 win, there's 1 point separating these 2 teams, and Conneaut has 2 more wins than Slip. I personally don't see the logic for putting Slippery Rock ahead of them. I'm not sure for certain that it matters as far as outcomes go for these first round games, but I just don't like the precedent that sets, that regular season results don't really matter.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to also factor in too. Both these teams are in the same region. They both finished at 1-4, and then you look at, okay, if we're going to talk about common opponents, the only common opponent that Slippery Rock and Conneaut played in which they did not achieve the same result in the winner loss column was Grove City. Conneaut blew them out. Slippery Rock lost to Grove City in bad fashion early in the season. I just I guess where I'm coming from is this. I think Josh Blood's team came on late in the season a lot better than what Slippery Rock did with those two big wins at the end of the year. And again, I just think you have to factor in overall record. I think that's such a huge part of it. Whereas, head to head, let's say they're both 5-5, then you make that argument. But again, to your point, Jonathan, it was not like it was a blowout when these two teams played a few weeks back. And I think when you look at these two squads now in their resumes, you factor in common opponents, and the win over Grove City to me would also push the needle in favor of Conneaut. Nonetheless, they both have really hard matchups, and I think more than anything, what you have to do is you have to credit Josh Blood in getting his team into the postseason at 5-5 and a great season for the Eagles, and they get a chance to play on further as we hoped.
Yeah, we kind of were debating 6, 7, 8 teams. We didn't really know which way the district would go and which way the committee would go. But after our last show, we had a little bit of discussion, and Conneaut deserves a shot. So I'm glad they got in. I'm glad they got their shot. And at 5-5, like they're a deserving football team to make the postseason. I'm still surprised about the seeding, but they've got their opportunity. So now it's a matter of what they do with it.
You look at the other two matchups and the ones that we're most excited for, and we're going to get into previewing these games on future episodes this week on the Gem City Sports Podcast. Make sure to stay tuned for those on Monday and Thursday, on maybe other special episodes too, with it being postseason. I think, to me, the most intriguing matchups in all the District 10 playoffs, minus the 6A championship game, are the 3-6 and the 4-5 matchup, Jonathan. And now it makes a lot more sense as to why Titusville Fairview didn't play their game in Week 10. They play each other in the first round coming up on Friday. I think this has the potential to be a barn burner. I'm excited for it. And I think when you look at specifically this matchup in particular, I think you're in a situation, at least in my view, where if you're Titusville, you have to hope that your offense is able to run rampant because Fairview's defense is one of the best in all of D10.
Yeah, if this is a low-scoring affair, Fairview gets the nod, in my opinion. It does make sense why they didn't play Week 10. Did they have an inkling that it was going to shake out like this? Little tidbit into the committee.
Yeah, you figured. You figured.
Somebody's got flies on the wall in the room, but no, this is going to be an amazing matchup. I love this matchup, and like you said, Titusville, if you can score a lot of points, if you can put up points on this defense that has been one of the better defenses in all of D10 this season, you got a really good shot. But if it's a low-scoring affair, I'm leaning Fairview.
Yeah, and again, we're going to preview it more so next week, but very exciting matchups in the 4-5 and then the rematch between Corey and Fort Leboeuf, one of only two Corey losses this year of the Bison, who are obviously banged up, and I know Corey's going to want that game back. That's the 3A bracket. Here's where we stand in the 4A bracket. It's the of the non-District 10 championship games immediately out of the gate. This is the smallest bracket. Just three teams. General McLean, as we expected in 4A, is the top seed. They get a bye and will likely sit for an Edinburgh University matchup in the D10 championship game. Meadville Oil City at, ironically, General McLean High School. That game Saturday, November 2nd. I'm intrigued about the Meadville Oil City game. This is an Oiler team that has played much better as of late down the stretch of the season. I think they're a lot better in terms of the run game than what their record would suggest. And keep in mind, when these two teams played earlier in the year, it was all the way back in September when I don't think the Oilers were very healthy. They've won two of their last three games to end the season. I think Meadville Oil City could be an interesting matchup, but obviously General McLean, with Franklin dropping out, gets the benefit of the bye, and they need it given the injuries they sustained against Prep.
Yeah, GM benefits really greatly from having the bye. It gives them a chance to get some guys back healthy, namely potentially getting back Jacob Zeitz for the playoffs would be a huge boost to this team going into the postseason. So that bye week was timely for them, and they earned it the way that they performed this season and the way that they played this year.
Yeah, go ahead.
As far as the Oil City matchup and Meadville, Oil City's played really well this year, and they've lost a lot of close games. They've taken a lot of area teams to the wire and have kind of been like the litmus tests, if you will, for a lot of local teams that have that common opponent. I'm not counting the Oilers out in this game. I've seen Meadville now against GM, and Meadville played GM really tough. However, there was a little bit of question, a little bit of speculation of how much GM was trying to show in that game.
Yeah.
Because they knew that down the road there might be a potential rematch. So they played GM really tough. I've seen them, but I don't know. I just have a sneaky suspicion about this Oil City team that they're not ready to go home quite yet.
And it's interesting because when you look at the 4A bracket in particular, the Meadville Oil City game is Saturday night at General McLean. However, there's still a determining factor as to whether the D-10 championship will be Friday or Saturday. I would imagine it would be based off of the facilities at Edinburgh University, though I don't know that for sure. I think the D10 championship probably going to be at Edinburgh, given that GM's the top seed, regardless of whether it's Meadville or Oil City, but we'll have to figure out whether that's Friday or Saturday. Here's 5A and 6A, and hey, Cathedral Prep fans, you have a game in the first week of the postseason, much to Mike Cray's delight. He was telling me that he would prefer to have a game in week 1 of the postseason, and Prep does. It's a 4-team sub-regional. Winner makes it on to the state tournament, and they get DuBois in a home game in 5A, Jonathan. Again, I say this. I think for Prep, it's a great thing that they get a chance to play the next week, but injuries are going to be a concern as Davin Friedman, Charbel Atouf good to go, but the Rambler is going to be playing on the first Friday night of postseason.
Yeah, that's something that since I've been here, I've heard hasn't really happened very often. Usually Prep winds up with that 2-3 weeks off, and it's one of those things where you love it if you got guys hurt, you got guys injured, and you get to get them back. But it's one of those things. It calls for rust a little bit. It calls for a little bit of rust and not being sharp heading into playoffs. So they get a first round matchup, they get a tune-up game, and hopefully they can get their guys back healthy and ready to go for this one. But like you said, coach is happy that they got a first round matchup and they get to play some football.
Yeah, and again, for Cathedral Prep, a chance to win a couple and then get to the state playoffs. And you look at the team they may be playing, it likely going to be Hollidaysburg. I think they're better than Alderdice, although I could be wrong in that. But Prep at home on Friday night in the first sub-regional game. And then the D10 championship, Jonathan, you and I will likely be at this one. McDowell Erie at General McLean on Friday night at 7 o'clock. Really the only thing that we questioned was the location. This is going to be an awesome game, and I know we're going to talk more in depth as we already have. But Friday night, the site for the District 10 championship game at GM on the new turf, it's going to be an awesome environment.
Yeah, that game is the one that I'm looking forward to the most, obviously. And I like I said before on the podcast, man, this is more of a toss-up than I think people are giving it credit to be.
Yeah, I don't disagree. And again, when we get into our previews, I think the one thing that you'll see and we'll talk about, whether it's between you, myself, Nick Artman, Paul Adamczyk, is just the fact that Erie's defense this season has been much better than what they've been in the past. And I think if they can contain Stephon Porter like they could not do in the regular season matchup, it could make for an interesting game. So there are your brackets, 1A through 6A. Some surprises, most expected. And when you look at the teams that are going to be playing on Friday night, 3A bracket is played on Friday. 5A and 6A will also be played on Friday. Everybody else gets Saturday games, and then some may switch depending on the matchups and the locations for next week. Jonathan, can't wait for this upcoming week. It's playoff time, and we got a lot of barn burners in the first week of playoffs.
Yeah, man, let's go. Postseason football. This is the best time of year, man.
All right, we are done with our instant reaction. 20 minutes, quick and dry. For Browns fans, you can go watch your team. I'm vouching for you here today. We are back again on Monday, as we've talked about. Our next show coming up just a few hours from now, not too long, 9 a.m. on Monday. Talk Erie, YouTube, X, Facebook, and Twitch will be there for more District 10 reaction, our players of the week, and then getting set for the District 10 playoffs. Take care, everybody. Make sure to make it a great Sunday. This has been a Gem City Sports Podcast Network production of our instant reaction to the District 10 football playoffs.